This podcast is proud to be sponsored by Tuvu. Tuvu connects people, families, and communities on their values based social media platform. There's no ads, no explicit content, just fun. Check it out at tuvu.com. Well, it seems like the loudest voices in the room, like the media and celebrities ranging from Taylor Swift to Oprah, are winning the day and they're getting out their hard left policies right before the election. Well, how can we as conservatives answer the rhetoric? Today, we're going to give you a conservative's survival guide to election season and beyond. Stay with us.
You know, I've never really felt comfortable sharing pictures of my kids on social media. Then I found Tuvu, a premium social app with an actual, authentic community. No bots, no one trolling me or my family. Just clean, wholesome content you can trust.
Welcome to the Moms for America podcast. Each week, special guests tackle the issues facing the moms of America today. Discussions include personal stories and advice on how moms can build a strong foundation of faith, family, and freedom in their homes and country. Well, hi, moms. I'm Debbie Corlitis, your host, and thank you so much for joining us again on the Moms for America podcast. Each week, right, we gather together to encourage, educate, and inspire moms on their journey through motherhood. Well, how about this? At least half of our country is made up of conservatives who believe in, you guessed it, conservative values like us, from parental rights to pro-life to a secure border to protecting our constitutional rights. These are true conservative values. Well, as the presidential election approaches, and you know this, you won't hear much about these values. The media won't cover them. But our guest today is joining us with some very interesting information. She has written a lot about the connection between faith, conservative values, and the culture. Amy Travis's most recent book is A Conservative's Survival Guide to Election Season and Beyond. Welcome, Amy. I'm so glad to have you here on the podcast. This is going to be a very important discussion for our moms.
Yes, thanks so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, first, can you tell us a little bit about your family? We always love to get to know our moms a little bit.
Sure. So I've been married. Perry and I have been married for over 36 years. We have 3 adult children.
Congratulations.
They're all currently serving in the military. So
Unbelievable.
our oldest and youngest are active duty. Our daughter is, her and her husband are both Air National Guard, but they're also Pittsburgh police officers.
Incredible.
And
How
then we
did
have one
everyone?
granddaughter.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm sorry. We also have one granddaughter who is now 10 months old.
Well, I heard the grandma thing is incredible. I'm not there yet, but I heard that's amazing.
It's the best.
That's what I heard. And how did everyone, just real quickly, how did everybody end up serving our country?
You know, it's interesting because we don't have any background in the military.
Yeah.
However, when the oldest was graduating from high school, he really didn't have a plan. He didn't know what he wanted to do. So I started researching for him. And in that process, he took some things I said, he disregarded the others, but he ended up active duty Air Force. His younger sister, while he was going through that process, she researched it herself and ended up Air National Guard. And she actually beat him into the military. And then the youngest is 10 years younger than the oldest. And so he just enlisted in the Navy, actually.
Wow.
He'll be in about a year and a half now.
That is, I don't know if I've ever heard a story like that. That's incredible.
Thank you.
Please let them know how much we appreciate them serving our country and stepping up like that. So this is a great segue, I guess, to really kind of the importance of understanding the foundation of our country and voting and protecting our liberties and our freedoms and the importance of that. Obviously, you have 3 children that are serving, and all of us understand that America is in a crisis and that we as parents and we as the next generation have to protect her and stand up for her. So with election season being here, and many saying this is the most important election in decades, and I would agree with that, what was your objective in writing A Conservative Survival Guide? How did this come up for you personally?
So I realized that a lot of friends who would, by their own admission, consider themselves low information voters. And so one of the things I also do as part of our STAND coalition is we hold STAND summits. So we had a summit coming up where we talked about the issues. And so we had a policing panel, and we had a retired state judge, and different people talk about the issues. So I knew as we were approaching that, I thought, I have all this information in my head.
Hmm.
I just need to sit down and organize it so I could explain to somebody, explain to my friends even, what is most important and what we need to know coming into this election.
Well, knowledge is power, right? Because
Exactly.
I think a lot of times, maybe some folks, and this is why I'm really interested in this book, that they know right and wrong. They know kind of their beliefs, but
Mhm.
they don't feel strong enough maybe to debate or to present or to maybe get into a discussion. So that is really what your book will help conservatives do, right? Because you're really helping conservatives understand and provide the information for their convictions, for what they know is true, but now now they can actually speak it even better or describe it better.
Exactly. So it will help you defend what we already know to be true.
Yes. That's exactly what I was trying to say.
You said it. You said it well.
There are anywhere from between 50 to 100 million evangelical Christians in the US. However, a very good proportion of these Christians are either not registered, not voting. I'll even tell you this, many of them are even voting against their
Mhm.
values and their belief system. Why is this still the case year after year and election after election?
I think there's a lot of different reasons. One of them, I think, even within the faith community, we're afraid to actually talk about the issues because we don't want to disenfranchise the other side.
Mm,
But I can tell you, and one of the things that I hit on in the book, and I had an opportunity to speak at a church this past weekend and talked about the exact reasons why the Democrat Party has been taken over by the radical left.
sure.
So that wasn't always the case. My grandparents grew up, in fact, both sides of the family, my grandparents were Democrats.
Mhm.
My mother's father emigrated from Italy in 1921, and he came through Ellis Island. He had served in the Italian regiment at the end of World War I as a very young soldier, so he was recruited as a uh, interpreter in World War II. And so he loved this country. In fact, he loved this country so much that he did not allow his children to speak Italian because he wanted them to be Americans.
Ah,
And so, what I think a lot of Christians and a lot of Americans don't understand is that party has left the building. It's no
sure.
longer here. The
I think
Democrat
people are really
Party,
seeing it though. Wouldn't you see they're seeing it more than ever now because it's so blatant.
yes, absolutely, they are. So I think there's still some that are not, but there definitely has been an awakening in the
Mhm.
past few years because of all the craziness we're seeing.
Well, on the heels of what you're mentioning there with Democrats, you know, there's such a great divide, and a lot of people have lost friends or family relationships over this, which is so unfortunate because we should always have a healthy discussion, right, in the
Exactly.
in the square of our home or at a family event, just respecting one another's opinions and hearing them. So you say that our Democrat friends and relatives are not the enemy, which of course I agree with you on that. But the enemy, who is the enemy and what are we fighting?
So we're fighting a demonic force which has come in and infiltrated one of our two major political parties. And so really that is the enemy. And
Mhm.
I think the more you study the issues, and so the other reason I wrote the book is it's so important to fight this with the facts because there are narratives on the other side that are trying to twist information and present something that isn't as though it is. And gaslighting has been the new term when we hear things said over and over again in a
Yeah.
very authoritative way, we tend to
Yeah.
question what we believe. So that's why facts are critical, and that we have to debate with facts, not with emotion.
Amen. Well, let's talk about some of the core values. I would call them facts, but core values that conservatives believe in. You say that there's 7, which a lot of people would completely agree with this list here. You want to go through that and just mention them because these are the ones that we should have really kind of written on a tablet in our heart, in our soul, because when we do talk about why we are voting or what we believe in or what we're championing, these are the conservative values, which are, just very important to have ready on your tongue.
Yes, so this was the list that Speaker Mike Johnson, so before he came to be the Speaker of the House, he had collaborated with a group of conservatives and come up with this list.
Right.
So the top of the list is individual freedom.
Hmm.
Number 2 is limited government. 3 is the rule of law. 4 is peace through strength.
Yeah.
5 is fiscal responsibility. 6 is free markets. And 7 is human dignity. And I think that's a good summation
And then
of what
human
we're dealing with.
dignity does include that would be the pro-life and protecting our children every stage of life and through end of life, correct?
Yes, absolutely. Cradle to the grave.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some other issues here at hand. Do most conservatives really understand these issues are important, really, from a biblical point of view? Are we looking at, some of us maybe separate politics from Christianity or our faith? And really, as a faith filled person, all of this runs hand in hand. All of it is connected because you vote, you share, you champion Christ's values and really his calling through all this. So do you think that people connect the importance of living out their Christian worldview with and a biblical viewpoint with politics,
I think
legislation?
we're starting to see a movement in that direction. I think
Hmm.
for a lot of people that's kind of a new concept, but I do think that it's starting to gain steam. And so when you look at the conservative worldview, it's based on biblical truth because it's
Right.
based on the natural order. So everything that we're seeing that's coming up as attacks against our children are things that are very unnatural. Even the idea of same-sex marriage, or definitely the idea that you could be a boy trapped in a girl's body, that goes against nature and that goes against God and the idea that he created us in his image.
Right. You also talk a lot, amen, on all that too. And I kind of just think too, I've been talking with a lot of friends right now, and we don't need really a political revival. We need a spiritual revival. I mean, this is far beyond politics. Politics aren't going to save us. Politics aren't going to save the country. It's really a revival from every corner and every home of our country. So this is so important to be talking about things from a biblical worldview because when we don't, that's when everything gets mixed up, right?
Absolutely. And I agree with you 100%. The solution to the problems that we are in America is not political. But I will tell you this, the problem sure is.
Yeah,
So the things that we're dealing with have come to us because our government has tried
sure
to
has.
undermine and actually take a torch to
Hmm.
what we know to be true, to truth and to
Hmm.
the natural order.
Yeah, yeah, it's very, very disturbing and it is very, very wrong. Let's talk about Marxism and socialism in your book. You talk a lot about that because these are terms that, kind of get thrown away. I'll never forget, thrown around, I should say. I'll never forget, I was at a Walgreens and I was buying something and there was this discussion about socialism. And the cashier, young kid, he said, I just don't think it's that bad. And I said, well, You have to understand what that really means and how basically you have no rights, no liberty, no freedom.
Mhm.
And could you ever survive in a world like that? It's easy to presume, but it's not easy to live. And it did roll into a really nice, robust conversation. But this is something that we have to really be addressing too, because there's this cultural movement to, is Marxism really bad, or are there really great things about it? And is socialism an option for all of us to consider. And we do see America pushing this way. Clearly, there is a huge movement on it. We've got Bernie Sanders, we've got, Waltz. I mean, there's a lot of people that
Mhm.
have a lot of socialism and merely Marxism ideals that they're trying to infiltrate, I'll say, into our government.
Agreed. And I think the most important thing to remember about Marxism is, so Karl Marx, the founder of Marxism, he felt that his entire duty and his purpose was to dethrone God.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Unreal, huh?
And so all of his policies and all of his viewpoints lead in that direction. And uh, as far as socialism, then I would like to get back. There's actually something that one of the political candidates has been saying in this. We can imagine what can be unburdened by what has been. That's a Marxist saying. That is not
Mm,
a word salad. But if we can come back to that in a minute, I'm sorry, I would like to address socialism because it took me a long time to understand this. But what the core of socialism is that the government controls all means of production. Now, of
yes.
course, that's not what we're being told. We're being told
Sure.
it's free stuff.
Hmm.
But what
Utopia.
happens is,
Right.
oh, I'm sorry.
No, I'm just saying utopia. They just take care of everything.
Exactly. But in order to do that, or to pretend to do that, what they do is they come in and take control of private industry. So,
Sure.
for example, you could have a family business. The government comes in and they take it over. They take the profits from it, and then they distribute to you as they see fit. And that's what people. I think what's hard for us to understand, especially as believers, we tend to think that socialism is about helping the poor, and it's not. It is all about empowering the government. It's never about empowering an individual.
Right.
And that's why the biblical mandate is so important, because anytime you see in the Bible that we are to care for the widow and the orphan and the homeless and the foreigner, those are individual mandates. So those are for us, and those are for us to do willingly
Yeah.
out of our love for God. So that never involves the state.
Sure.
God knew that uh, he that the care for the poor was to be entrusted to us as believers, because the
Amen.
government would mess it up.
Yeah, and they have, and that's why it's just been such a shame that we've taken all of these ministry opportunities. I mean, the church is still ministering clearly, but the government's taken over all of that by government welfare and daycare and subsidizing, and really us, our church, and our community and our families is where it should have remained, and they've really gotten ahead of all of us, so much so that they're ruling the world with dominating families and really of
Mm.
making them dependent on them, which we all know is just a huge problem with government assistance. Did you have another thought before we leave the socialism, Marxism? I don't want to move on because I've got so many great things to talk with you about. But was there a remaining thought you had?
Yes, I just wanted to go back to when we talked briefly about the statement that Kamala Harris is saying about we can imagine what can be unburdened by what has been. And to thoroughly understand what she's
Can
saying
you say
there,
that again so we make sure we get that? Because
certainly,
if she's taking it out of the playbook, I want to make sure I get it myself.
sure. So she has said several times, we can imagine what can be unburdened by what has been. And a lot of people have
Mm.
chalked that up to just, her word salads, right? That she doesn't know what she's talking about, but it's not true, because her father was a Marxist professor. And so
Yes.
this is right out of Karl Marx Communist Manifesto. And so when communists say that we can see a future, if we get rid of what has been, well, here's what's been: the Constitution, the rule of
Sure.
law in America, and the church. That's really what they want to get rid of and envision a future without those things.
Sure. In fact, if the moms have not read, I think it's 29. Is it 29? 29 areas of the Communist Manifesto.
Oh, I'm not familiar with that one.
Okay, so there is a whole list of the Communist Manifesto that you can read, and I think there's 29 of them,
Oh,
and most of them are already enacted. Most of them are already enacted and disturbing. And as soon as you read that, you would understand really what a critical place we are in right now, which is exactly what you're referring to. But maybe I'll just stay right here on Kamala Harris because she talks a lot, along with maybe, quoting Marxist ideology. She also is very, she plays all the sides, right? Now she's gone from ultra liberal to progressive, now back to the middle, and now she's even leaning right half the time. So we're not sure what she's doing, but she talks a lot about equity. And equity is something that she keeps talking about. And really, there's a big difference between equity and equality. And you talk about that.
yes. So equality. So what progressives want is not equal opportunity, they want equal outcomes. So that's where they want to give. Actually, what's happening with the hurricanes is a great example. I just saw a quote of her saying that we need to distribute help using the idea of equity. So to give more aid to communities of color and lower class individuals. And so that is not, and that is not a biblical principle in any regard. Equality is the idea that we're all created in God's image and that we all have opportunities here in America. And it's true. So to prioritize a class, that's another idea of Marxism where the state creates winners and losers,
Right.
whereas that's not God's plan at all.
Correct. And they divide. And they create
Absolutely right.
tension. And yes, if one needs food, the other needs food. That's how we look at that's a humanitarian crisis. That is not a color. And it is something that all of us need to be involved in. In fact, Moms for America is working pretty heavily on this
Mm,
hurricane as well and bringing down a lot of
wonderful.
relief and support, which is wonderful. Like you said, we are all here looking for ways to serve and ways to help.
Mhm.
And it's not based on anything else besides those that are in need and those are hurting. The other thing that Kamala talks a lot about, and maybe the Democrat versus Republican, that's why kind of I mentioned that when you talked about some of those principles, core values, is reproductive rights. And some
Mhm.
people on the right are one issue voters, some people on the left are one issue voters. And I guess this is something as conservative women, women of faith, we need to look at and be educated about. So, what's your thoughts on that?
I'm glad you brought that up. That is an extremely critical issue. And as believers, we want to have compassion, right? So sometimes we think, oh, well, maybe this is, maybe
Sure.
we need to consider this. But what I'm coming to understand is when the left talks about reproductive rights, they're really not about protecting individuals. That's the message they want to get across. But when you take a step back and you look at the abortion industry, it is a multi-billion
Million. Yeah.
dollar industry. And so to go back to 1916, Margaret Sanger opened the first abortion clinic uh, in the US. And so initially it was to take care of what she considered, I forget the term she used, like rodents or
No, yeah, very condescending.
yes,
Yeah, right.
extremely condescending. And so it started
Yes.
with the immigrants that had come from Europe. And then in 1939, she started the Negro Project. And what is so sinister about this is she actually enlisted Black pastors to help convince the young Black women to abort their babies. And so I think what we as Christians and as conservatives need to understand that abortion was never intended to be healthcare. It's not healthcare. it was always intended to be a genocide. And
Yeah.
a genocide, by definition, and this took me a while to figure out too. I always
Hmm.
thought of it as like a tribal war, the stronger one wins, but it's not. A genocide is when a government systematically eliminates
A
the
population,
a population. Yes, usually an ethnic group.
right? And
And
high
so,
percentage of all those abortion clinics are in Black and brown communities. That is a stat. That is always the way it has
absolutely.
been. That's only the only communities that they've moved into. And I do want to say this too. When I talk about reproductive rights, I don't know what the heck they're talking about because it literally is abortion. What the left and progressives do very, very well is they rename, they restructure, they change the
Exactly.
messaging. And all of a sudden they come up with words that, just like sound palatable. And reproductive rights only mean that is clearly taking a life, and that is clearly abortion. So when we hear this, this is just another situation
Mhm.
for us to be aware and conscious of it because it sounds nice, you know, it sounds almost like healthcare, which of course is what they're hoping it would be. So again, a last comment on that before I take you somewhere else here on reproductive issues or rights, abortion with women.
Sure. And so, I, the other thing that I started to understand just in the last couple of years is that I had mentioned earlier that it has nothing to do about protecting an individual's rights. So leftist politicians actually launder money through Planned Parenthood.
Yeah.
And
Another great
the
point you're
way,
bringing up. Yes.
yeah, so and the way they do that is that they collude with so these congressmen and women, and they
Mhm.
can and you can be on the left and be a registered Republican. So I want to make that clear too. I am not anti-Democrat in any manner. I am anti-left, but what they do is so they could collude with organizations like Planned Parenthood, and they agree to vote for and write bills to provide government funding, so taxpayer funding for
Mhm.
Planned Parenthood. And I don't know that everyone that we all understand that our
Yeah.
government is actually paying Planned Parenthood,
Oh, sure.
for abortion.
Right. Well,
And
we
so
always said if they had to self-fund, like the crisis pregnancy centers, they would shut down immediately.
I exactly,
So,
exactly.
yeah.
So then the way the money is laundered, then Planned Parenthood pledges uh, to donate to their campaigns. And so I just recently saw an article, and it was a New York Times article.
Mhm.
Uh, Actually, it was back, I was recently saw it, but it was back from 2021 that they were pledging 435 million to Biden's reelection campaign as well as congressional Democrats.
Wow.
So this has nothing to do with women's rights. And the other point I'd like to make, and Deb, you probably have talked to women, you probably have friends that have gone through this horrific
Yeah.
ordeal, that they've had abortions, and there is nothing pro-woman about abortion.
Right.
And I think sometimes in our compassion, we want to think, well, we have to leave this option open. And it is from I don't believe we do. I think it's from the pit of hell, and it's really all about laundering money, unfortunately, and
Yeah.
abusing and
And to
taking
take
advantage.
advantage of a young girl or a mom in a crisis situation and say that that's really just their only option. We've got to do this better. We have to come along, our women, our moms, our young girls, help them carry that baby full term. And let's get those babies
Yeah,
adopted. Let's think about new ways where we can help life remain instead of just, this doesn't help that mom. In fact, you talk to anyone that has dealt with this and our hearts go out to
exactly.
them, they never get over it.
They don't, and it doesn't. And so, if you have a young woman living in poverty, killing her child does not get her out of poverty. Right? So
Yeah.
yes, there's a lot of things. And actually there are also safe haven laws. So there are so many alternatives to abortion.
Yeah.
So a man or a woman can render a unharmed infant baby to a hospital or a fire
Mhm.
station and not face any charges. So
Yeah.
there's so many other options.
Yeah.
Adoption, there's so many people that want to adopt.
Yeah, we've done a lot on this topic, and actually the gal that did, baby rescue boxes. So,
Mm,
I mean, there are so many options, and again, our hearts and we do pray for everyone that's dealing with this topic, and it is reason why we're
Exactly.
talking about it, because it is a big topic as the elections are facing us right now. You talk about 6 policy areas. You talk about things that Democrats say or Republicans say about these issues: immigration, the economy, the environment, crime, abortion, like we just said, and the weaponization of government. We can't really break all of those down, but what would you say that there's just I guess there's unless you can break them down pretty quickly, but I mean, this is really the topics everybody's talking about during this election.
It really is. And what was fascinating is when I was watching the vice presidential debate, is Tim Walz, he tried to present these same topics. So for example, and this was really terrible when he tried to use scripture to justify how our government should have passed the uh, oh, I'm sorry, the border security bill. That's what it's called. And just as a way to kind of lump them all
Mhm.
together,
Mhm.
you'll start to notice that when the left puts together legislation, if you want to know what they're really up to, look at the opposite. And you alluded to this already, Deb. Look at the opposite of what they say. So, for example, the Inflation Reduction Act, we know that that was the bill that actually caused the largest surge in inflation in decades. And
It's
so when you see
incredible.
a border security bill, you
Yeah,
know that's the exact opposite of what they're trying to do.
so
And
true.
so Tim, I'm sorry.
No, I'm saying so true. They do that, like even like a safety act. It's really unsafe. If they say it's A,
Exactly.
it's the complete opposite.
Yes. Or Respect for Marriage Act. Oh, that's another one. I don't think we have time to get into that, but that
Right.
is terrible. The
Another
Disrespect
example.
for Marriage Act.
Yeah. And I know a
The
lot of this, we just really have to really investigate. This is why your book is so helpful, because you break all this down. So one of the things you've alluded to the fact that, maybe moms are maybe preferring President Trump's, we're talking a lot about Kamal, is it, no, I'm saying her name wrong.
I know. I
It's
can't I
Kamal,
can't get it right.
Kamal,
I'm not even doing
Kamala.
that intentionally. I just can't.
No, I know. But when we talk about President Trump, some of the moms aren't really maybe a fan of his style, or you know, I'm not asking you for advice on that, but it
Yeah.
definitely is one of the things you hear across the country. I
It
mean, I
is.
love him, but that's
I
me.
love him too. And I want to fight her.
Yeah,
So yes, we're huge fans here. But what I would say, and what I said in the book, is that we have to vote policies, not people.
correct.
And especially there's
For
been
both
such a
sides,
yeah,
Republican,
well,
Democrat.
exactly,
It doesn't
exactly.
matter. It's voting on policy. That's the foundation. But continue on that, because
It is. And
this is the bottom line on your vote.
exactly. And so I really think that a lot of it, especially for the evangelical community, comes down to just a lack of information. And because we're hammered with so many things on
Mhm.
so many different sides. And so being able to discern the lies, and that's why I did put a list of Democrat talking points. So the one that the Tim Walz really hit on was trying to blame the border crisis on the Republicans. But
Mm.
Byron Donald, actually, after the debate, came out with a fantastic post as to why that border bill, why he and his colleagues did not vote for that. Because it wasn't going to secure the border, is the bottom line. And there was funding in there for, I actually have a list here of what he said. So it legalized the entry of 1,800,000 illegal aliens per year. This is the bill that they wanted to pass. It funded sanctuary cities. It funded the NGOs that are actually transporting the migrants. It codified catch and release, which
Mm.
that means that someone seeks asylum, they come and fill out the paperwork. President Trump had a policy that they had to remain in Mexico until it was time for their
Right.
hearing. Well, catch and release means you fill out the paperwork and then you're free to go anywhere in the country, and then you just have to come back
Yeah.
on your court date.
Release is the key phrase on that. That's the key word.
Exactly. Exactly. And
So,
the other thing which the left will not tell you is that that alleged border security bill included $60 billion for Ukraine. So they were
Which
trying to
now is
sneak
really
that
coming
in.
back because we don't even have
Yes.
enough funding to help the hurricane victims. 700 and something
I
dollars a person.
know, because FEMA used
Yeah.
their budget
Yeah.
to relocate illegal aliens.
Yeah. So it's
Yeah,
all
it's
com
tragic.
it is very tragic, and I hope that people are watching and listening. So in your book, you do have a quick guide to the US Constitution, which is very
Mhm.
important for all of us to understand. It's kind of like the Bible of our historical foundation, right? Would be the
Right.
Constitution. We hand these out everywhere. We actually do classes on the Constitution and the importance
Right.
of teaching our children those principles and that founding document. Why did you feel it so necessary to include that and discuss that, obviously, in your book as well?
Because I realized that there are so many ways that our constitutional rights are being violated.
Mhm.
So that's why I wanted to just run through it so we all understand. And I'll give you just an example, one that is less known. So we obviously know about the First Amendment, and that's about protecting our free speech and our right to assemble and even to redress grievances with the government. So that's what the First Amendment. The Third Amendment, though, is a little more obscure, and it's of course, this was written back during the Revolutionary War, but it talked about that a citizen was not required to take soldiers into his private home. Okay, to quarter soldiers is the term. And what we're seeing now in some states, and I believe it's Minnesota or Wisconsin, where the governor, and it's not Minnesota, I think it's Wisconsin, the governor is saying that citizens may be required to take illegals into their home. So this is why it's so important that we understand what the Constitution says. And so those first 10 amendments are the Bill of Rights, and those are the
Mhm.
things that are really we need to understand, and we need to force our government to respect. As long as the Constitution is the law of the land and we have to fight to keep it such, then we need to have those rights.
All right, Amy, hold on just one second. We're going to go to a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about all this, wrap it up, and talk a little bit about more the importance of having our core Christian viewpoint reflect our vote.
What kind of America do you want to leave future generations? What do you want America to look like for your children and your grandchildren? Our nation is at a crossroads, and it will be us, the mothers of America, who will determine the future of our country. What we teach and nurture in the hearts of our children and how we vote will make all the difference. If you love God, respect life, honor family, and cherish freedom, then use your voice and be heard. We teach these values in our home. Let's secure them with our vote.
All right, moms, welcome back. I do want to take a quick minute here and remind everyone to like, subscribe, and share the podcast. We really do appreciate that. This is how we get the word out, share our message, and of course, they keep censoring us. So please share. Also, if you have any feedback or if you have a title or a topic that you would like us to cover, would you please email me at podcast@momsforamerica.net. Just in general, I would love to hear from you because we so appreciate you, moms. And lastly, are you a part of our family? I surely hope you are. If not, you need to go to momsforamerica.us and join the movement. We're an incredible family, moms all across this country. We're uniting all across the country in every home, every community, every state, fighting for faith, family, freedom, and the Constitution. And we would love to supply you with all of the resources that you need. Go ahead, check us out at momsforamerica.us. All right, Amy, welcome back here. In your book, you listed 17 core values of conservative Christian worldview. I would like to run through, we can't do all 17. Again, you got to get the book, right? But I do want to highlight maybe, a few of these in the beginning, that would be maybe, I don't know if you are there top ones to the 17. How would you
Sure,
do that?
sure.
Let's maybe talk a little bit about these and then just kind of tease the fact that there are 17 of these that everyone needs to review, understand, maybe talk about in your home, right? These 17 core values of conservative Christian worldview would be great to be discussing at your kitchen table with your children.
It absolutely would, because what the worldview is the connection between biblical truth and then reality, basically. So it's how do we relate those, and what if I could just back up for a second and talk about the fact of how I really started to study the biblical worldview is I noticed that there were so many people that read scripture that could even quote the Bible, but yet it didn't relate. There was a disconnect in particularly when it came to politics. That's really how I got into politics. So I started by studying the Bible, and I realized that there was a disconnect there. And so that's what led me into the really studying the biblical worldview as it applies to politics. And what's crazy is that so many of these things really are not political, but they've been politicized by our government.
Yes, that is it.
Yes, and so that's
Protecting your child, that's not political,
exactly, or
right?
the idea that
Right,
a baby is born male or female. That's not
right,
political. That should have never been political. And really,
exactly.
God is the one who defined the institution of marriage between one man and one woman.
Right.
And the important thing too, as we go through the core values of the biblical worldview, is that when God says to do something, it is for our protection. He says, don't do this because it will harm you. And
Mm,
so, for example, the first of the core values is human life is special.
mhm.
And so this gets down to the idea that there is so much in the Bible, and I list a couple in here. If you're
Right.
looking for the actual
I see you've
defense
got the
of,
scriptures here. Yes, that's beautiful.
yes,
God
thank
created us
you.
male and
Yes,
female would be the second. I mean, that's what I'm saying. When I started reading these, I don't even know what you would say. There is no number one,
well,
right?
exactly. Yeah, they're all very core uh,
Traditional
to what
family
we're
unit.
talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And so, and marriage is God's way of protecting us. And if you look at, there's so many statistics on the benefits of marriage, and what we're seeing now and what's happening with the same-sex marriage
Yeah.
is that is actually, it's not helpful. It there's so many negative aspects to that
Oh, the
because
destruction of the family, clearly.
it
Yeah.
is exactly so that,
Yeah.
and
Well, I
so
do want
number,
to, so I do want to just,
sure.
so what would be the best thing just to say? And your book will be 17 core values. And what would be your advice with these? We can't go through all them right now, but I want you to give maybe advice to those and how to discuss those with your children.
Sure. So these are things that will really relate to what's going on right now. So if you look
Mm-hmm.
at these, for example, number 9, I'll just throw out a couple. Law and order are God's ideas, not God's idea, not ours. So these are things that will
Mm-hmm.
help you and will help your children to say, okay, so this is how the Bible relates to 2024. And because sometimes it can be very difficult. We think, well, these are cultural things. So it really
Mm.
takes the scripture and it applies it to what's happening in the here and now.
I would like to just bring up a point here too. These are timeless truths.
Yes, because they're Bible, right?
Yeah. So it's not trendy. It's not just for now. These are
Mhm.
timeless truths. And I think that's the things that really stabilize the foundation in our home and our relationship with Christ and the way we look at our worldview. How, along with doing these 17 and to go over them, and really do encourage our moms to do that. I'm going to read through those. Like, I love the fact that you got the scripture verses next to them. How can we approach maybe other moms who are not registered devout, or other moms that maybe just don't see the value? I kind of feel like we've been talking a lot about people that are maybe engaged and supporting their the information. But what about those that are not, our family members? And, how do we get into this discussion about voting, importance of their vote?
Sure. I would say that the one critical uh, point that is on the ballot in November is whether we are going to protect our children or whether we are going to open up the government to exploit our children. And I think that is the number one thing. So much of what we're talking about, protecting innocent life, and we didn't even get into the transgender movement and really how that is an assault on God, on our faith,
On
on
creation,
our
yeah.
children, and everything. So that is really what is on the ballot in November. So if you love your children, I think that's how I would approach and how I do approach moms is if you love your family, if you want to protect your children, you have to educate yourself and you have to vote in November.
Well said. Where can we get a copy of your book?
So it's available on Amazon. It is also on my website, standforgodandcountry.com. So it's standforgodandcountry.com or standcoalitionus.com. But yes, but you can buy it on Amazon.
Well, thank you for all the research that you have done. Thank you for really kind of pouring your heart into this. I love all the information and the details, and it definitely is something that our moms will really benefit from. So God bless you, Amy, for being
Thank you,
such a
Deb. So
warrior.
wonderful to talk to you. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
And we need all of this plus more. So God bless you in your
God
journey.
bless
And
you.
again, our moms can go ahead, get this information and share that with their friends in their community, and most of all, in their home.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.
Well, moms, obviously, like we've been talking, it is election season. And I do want to mention, too, that we, along with Amy's great book here, we do have a lot of great resources on our website. We have a whole Mom Vote initiative. It's not about who to vote for, it's about the policies, the values, the principles, the platforms. And you can go to momsforamerica.us, look up Mom Vote, and we'll talk about all those. It will actually make sure that you're registered to vote, give you text messages about when early voting starts, a lot of information about the platforms there as well. So I love this conservative survival guide to election season because we all need to be in the game and know who and when and what we're voting for. All right, moms, well, thank you so much for being a part of our program. We so appreciate here at Moms for America, momsforamerica.us. Please check out all of our resources. We have incredible resources, webinars, and seminars just for you, Mom. I say this every week. We're here to serve you from public policy to parental rights, from the kitchen table to Congress. Moms for America has it all. Alrighty, I'm going to see you next week. And as always, let's keep changing our country one home at a time. Thanks, moms.